What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row, and we have a very, very special guest carving some time out of his busy schedule to meet with Lettermen Row. It's Jesse Simonton on the other side of that screen, On3 national college football writer. Jesse, how you doing, man? Are you finally getting a little rest after recapping, I don't know, 9 position groups and 134 teams of them?
No, but this is the good time of the off season, so it's good just to be talking ball, man.
Exactly. I don't want to be talking court cases. I don't want to be talking, meetings, NCAA headquarters. We just get to talk ball, and that's fantastic. So let me get this straight. You think Ohio State's pretty talented this year? Is that correct? Would you say that?
Yeah, I'd suffice to say I think Ohio State's rocking a pretty ridiculous roster. I mean, when you factor in all the guys, and you guys have the boots on the ground there with Lettermen Row. I mean, all the guys that they got back, the JTTs, Sawyer, to get Denzel Burke back, to get Travion Henderson, to come back. I mean, you're just talking about a host of day one, day two NFL draft picks. And then you're just go and say, hey, we'll go grab us a Caleb Downs. We'll go grab us a Quinshon Judkins. And honestly, and I wrote about this, and hopefully your followers there on your site saw it earlier this offseason. But I think one of the most impressive additions that Ryan Day did in terms from my perspective to say, hey, this guy really gets it, is Julian Sayen's available. You already had Will Howard. You already brought in Aaron Nolan. The quarterback room, the depth there, frankly, was as good as really anywhere else in the country. And that didn't scare Ryan Day from saying, hey, there's another stud available, and may the best man win. And I'm going to bring him in. And if that maybe causes some friction, or if that, results in another guy transferring, he wasn't afraid of that. And I think, that's how Kirby Smart does it at Georgia. That's how Nick Saban did it at Alabama. It takes that kind of championship confidence to say, again, the best man, they're going to win. And so love Ohio State's overall roster for sure.
Jesse, you put Texas's quarterback room. I don't want to speak for you, but especially because of those top two with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, you put Texas's quarterback room at number 1, Ohio State number 2. How close was that decision for you with what Ohio State has in the quarterback room?
Frankly, that wasn't really that close for me.
Okay.
And mainly that's because I will say, if there's one area where I am a bit of a skeptic on Ohio State, it's that I don't know that Will Howard is some, massive upgrade compared to Kyle McCord. I do think he's going to be better. I think he's less turnover worthy. I think Kyle McCord put a lot of balls in the air a year ago that could have been intercepted that weren't. And I think Will Howard's going to be better suited in Chip Kelly's system, utilizing his legs. That frankly, and again, you guys have outlined a lot of this stuff, but just kind of diving into the numbers. I mean, Ohio State's red zone offense was one of their bugaboos a year ago. So can they score more touchdowns? I think Will Howard's legs will offer that complement. But if I'm putting him up A1, A2 or whatever, I think Quinn is clearly the better quarterback. And then, as high as I am on Julian Sayen and his upside, frankly, there's been just as much reason to believe in Arch too. So, and Arch certainly looked the spot. Just a spring game. I know it's a scripted scrimmage, but Arch looked really good. So that Ohio State being firmly 2, I think, to me, should not lack many quibbles from folks. I think that seems pretty fair.
Yeah, I wanted to hear it exactly from your mouth, because I wouldn't put Ohio State number 1 in quarterback room, but they've got 5 guys, and I think it's a pretty good room.
Right.
It is. You have them at number 2. So we're going to keep going down the line here. Running back, Ohio State number 1 room. Wide receiver, Ohio State number 1 room. Was it harder to pick Ohio State as the number 1 running back room with the 2 proven guys, or the number 1 wide receiver room with a lot of talent, but maybe there's not as much proven talent there? Like, was it a harder decision to put the Buckeyes on top of the running back rankings or the wide receiver rankings this year?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, it was a slam dunk to me for Quinshon and Travion as 1-2. Now, I do think depth, maybe could be a bit of an issue compared when you lose a Dallin Hayden. That's not ideal. You lose the kid Chip to Kentucky. But I thought that was kind of a slam dunk. Now you could make the case that Oregon or Texas, even Ole Miss, maybe, has wide receiver rooms as good as Ohio State. But if Jeremiah Smith is what everyone says he is, and whatever he looked like in all these highlights I've seen, and everybody I've talked to, and what is he, the earliest kid in Ohio State history to get the black stripe removed, and you bring back, Mbuka, and then you have, I think Carnell Tate probably is going to be much better this year, another season. What is Brandon Ennis? And so when it's hard not to bet on Brian Hartline. He stacked all these 5 stars, getting the most out of at least 3 or 4 of them. So that was certainly a tougher deal, but I still think that, I had Ohio State 1, obviously.
There are 10 offensive line units around the country that are better than the Buckeyes. You did a lot of studying. Like I think this is one of the most impressive things anybody at On3 does the entire year is rank the 10 best position groups at every position group. Ohio State's offensive line was not great last year, but Josh Simmons got better as the year went on. I'm sure you learned that in your studies and saw that as time went on. Seth McLaughlin comes in, hasn't had any snapping issues since he got to Ohio State from Alabama. Donovan Jackson comes back. You got Josh Fryer still in the mix. Not the best season last year, but returns his second year as a starter. Like, where did you see this Ohio State room, and were they close to being ranked? And do you think that they're going to be better this year?
I do think they probably be a little bit better. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have my rankings pulled up. Did I have them in the best of the rest?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had them like kind of next up, or one of those next teams up. I cut them at the end, because again, the offensive line is easily the hardest unit, one of the hardest units to do with this exercise. Frankly, there's a lot of guys who know infinitely more about offensive line play than I do. So I'm talking to people. I'm using PFF as a resource. I'm using some sports analytics stuff, as a resource. They did, some of their guys, one guy may be a really good run defender and the other guy is a terrible pass, protector. And so I do think there is still some continued uncertainty. And even reading some of the stuff that you guys wrote, again, talking to folks elsewhere, that probably does seem to be probably the biggest concern still for the Buckeyes entering 2024. Can they get the 5 guys right? Do they have the, depth and stuff there? So you get Donovan back, which I think is good. I think Seth will be fine. So that's a solid addition from Alabama. I just don't think they quite have the mustard up front that maybe some of the other teams, particularly the best teams in the country. I mean, that could be, what holds Ohio State back this year, frankly, because when you look at the offensive lines at Georgia, at Texas, Oregon, those are some of the best units on their team. And so if being big and dominating in the trenches proves to be the difference, that could be, what holds the Buckeyes back in 24. We'll see.
So I went back and did some digging on what we talked about last year, because we did this video last year. And next year, I hope that you leave Lettermen Row with a good experience, and you come back in 2025 and we talk about all this again.
For sure.
We argued quite a bit last year. I think even publicly a little bit, Jesse, about the defensive line at Ohio State. And if there's one thing that can wreck the Georgia offensive line or the Texas offensive line or Oregon, or like you said,
I believe I won that, right? Because I believe I had Michigan.
Yeah, no, you did. You were right. And so I'm here to tell you that you were right. And if you are right this year, Ohio State fans will be very, very happy, because you have Ohio State, much to the chagrin of some, as the number 1 defensive line / edge group in America. Obviously returning a lot. We don't have to go through the exact names. Everybody who's watching this knows all those guys. But how tough was that to rank Ohio State number 1? And do you think that this is the kind of unit that can propel Ohio State to some heights that, number one pass defense in the country last year, but that was on the back of the secondary, not even as much the defensive line. Like, how much do you think that this defensive line can change the way Ohio State plays defense this year? And number one defensive line, like, that's high praise, nationally.
Yeah, I mean, to the chagrin of others, I mean, Tennessee fans were apoplectic that I had them at 9, and I'm high on James Pierce, but I think when you see the other pieces, that Ohio State does return. I mean, that's what it's JTT and Sawyer came back for a reason. They want to be first round draft picks, so they are motivated, highly motivated, to play their way into such. You bring back some defensive tackles. You then add a guy like Edric Houston, who, it's just a 5-star that we get to throw in there. You have a Kenyatta Jackson, another, I believe he's a former 5-star, trying to get him in the mix for more snaps. The upside is really, really high, but then the floor is super high too. And I think that's kind of, Michigan, again, I have Ohio State ahead of Michigan this year, but it's the same thing with Michigan. I mean, I think, when you return those two interior guys in Grant and Mason Graham, your floor is going to be super high. And then it's like, all right, we're going to get even more out of, the transfer from Coastal Carolina, Josiah Stewart. So Ohio State loved their front, could absolutely be positive in the inverse of the offensive line. That could be what actually does position the Buckeyes to beat a Texas or whoever, come the playoff this fall.
Does Ohio State have the best secondary in the country? You rank the corners number 1, the safeties number 2. I would assume that was probably a battle just behind Iowa at that safety spot, and I would love to get your thoughts on that safety position. But overall, the secondary, like, did you go through this and come away thinking like, yeah, this is the best secondary, corners and safeties combined in the country?
They are. I think Iowa's 100%. I think they're the best. If I just did the secondary solo, all units considered, Ohio State would definitely be number 1. They did. They suffered a couple depth losses that probably were either not anticipated or maybe not exactly ideal this spring. Iowa got the top spot to me from the safety spot just because Caleb Downs is unequivocally the best player of any of those guys. But I do think that the two pieces that Iowa have are extremely complementary, and how productive they were even playing in a defense with Castro, who might be the best nickelback in the country, and Cooper DeJean a year ago. I'm a huge fan of Phil Parker. I just think Iowa's defensive coordinator is one of the best too. Jim Knowles is awesome. What he's done in 3 years, 2+ seasons with couple seasons with Ohio State has been much needed for Ryan Day. But the safety spot just behind Iowa, and then they clearly bringing back Burke and the likes, Proctor, those guys at corner, they're in a great spot.
Yeah, I think this secondary has a chance to be very, very special. Burke and, like you said, with Denzel Burke coming back and Davison Igbinosun and Jordan Hancock coming back in the nickel, the Big Ten probably has the 3 best nickels in the country with, like you said, at Iowa, Castro, and then you've got Hancock, and then, I just kind of bank on Michigan's nickelback being good because the way the Sanders still was, and you can put a guy in there and plug and play with that system. And the secondaries in the Big Ten this year, I was fascinated with your rankings, and it kind of goes to show, like, if you're looking to throw the ball in the Big Ten, like, unless you have absolute dudes at wide receiver, good luck, because like these Big Ten defensive backs are going to shut you down.
Yeah, when you bring in Oregon this year, and they led the Pac-12 in pass defense a year ago, and then they go out and get Washington's best corner in Jabbar Muhammad, and so they return a bunch of guys in the secondary, and then they bring in an All-American. So I do wonder, and maybe actually this could be a good bouncing off point to you. I do wonder, because they're so stacked with these defenses. A year ago, that certainly obviously suppressed a lot of the, or not suppressed, but it, masked maybe some of these offensive deficiencies that these teams had. Will they be challenged enough, all via the passing game before you then go play in the playoff against a team like Georgia that can throw the ball, team like Texas that can throw the ball, Ole Miss? That's going to be a question. Maybe the fact that you're bringing in an Oregon who definitely is going to, challenge you both vertically and horizontally. USC, we know, likes to throw the ball. So maybe there'll be some more opportunities for these, secondaries to get tested a little bit.
Well, Ohio State definitely is not going to be tested before they head to Eugene on October 12th, because it's 3 non-cons, which includes 2 MAC teams and Marshall, and then it's Michigan State, and then it's Iowa, and then you got to head to Oregon. Good thing that they're returning a lot in that secondary, because we already know that they're good. Because if they were an untested group heading to Eugene against that Oregon passing attack with Evan Stewart and them and those guys out there and Dylan Gabriel, I'd be pretty concerned. The good news,
Johnson, yeah.
I mean, it's a special group out there in Eugene, which brings me to what you're catching so much heat for now, which you do the Lord's work, man. Putting these rankings out and hearing it from fan bases. Big Ten power rankings are officially out, and those might be even more difficult than the position groups, because you know that you have to make an entire team mad, not just a position group mad. Let's go through the top 5 here. It's Ohio State number 1, which I was a little stunned by, if I'm being honest. Even with the rankings, the lofty rankings you gave Ohio State in these position groups. Ohio State number 1 in the Big Ten, Oregon 2, Michigan 3, Penn State 4, and then Nebraska 5. What was the thought process there? How tough was that? How much were you wrestling? How many sleepless nights were there between Ohio State and Oregon there at the top?
Not to me. I thought that was pretty frank. I thought 1-2 seems pretty clearly defined with what they've done in the portal. Again, these are post-spring, post-portal. So who got hurt, who didn't get hurt? Were you able to nominally improve in some areas? Oregon did, I will say. They go out and in a defensive tackle market that was pretty bearish. There was a lot of guys fighting over the same 4 or 5 guys. Well, Oregon just goes in there and says, hey, we'll go grab one of the best of them, and they get the kid from Michigan State. So that was a big-time need. I do think that Oregon is in right now, Spencer, the way I see it, both for the Big Ten and just nationally, because my spring post-portal top 25 will come out on Monday next week. I see it as Tier 1, Georgia, Ohio State. Tier 2, Texas, Oregon, and Alabama. And then Tier 3 is kind of this next grouping, Michigan and that kind of stuff. I am still higher on Michigan, I think, than many others. Both my national colleagues and then just maybe some, folks in the Big Ten, boots on the ground, what have you. I think there's a lot of they lost so much. They lost, how much brain power can you lose? You lose all that talent. They still have 4 or 5 first-round draft picks on that team. And then what they've done in the last week or so in the portal has been exactly what they had to do. They had to go out and get some new pieces in the secondary, and they did. Now, we'll see if they hit on all those guys. But I think the Wolverines, a lot of folks have Penn State ahead of them, or, where is USC and those kind of teams. I'm a little lower on USC coming out of the spring, a little higher on Iowa. And I think, Ohio State, this is if they doesn't get it done this year, I don't know, because he's got a hell of a team, and the schedule I think sets up fairly well for them. They may have to beat Oregon twice. I understand that's difficult, but this is a team that should not only really compete for the Big Ten, obviously, and perhaps reclaim the throne there, but get to the college football playoff and make a deep run, semifinal or final.
Yeah, that top 5 is interesting because, I said on our message board the other day that I thought Iowa was a top 5 team in the Big Ten. I caught a lot of flack from our Lettermen Row, good paying members and who come to us for information. But hearing you say that you're high on Iowa kind of validates that for me. Maybe we disagree a little on Nebraska, but this isn't a Nebraska show, so we don't have to talk about our disagreement on that.
That's fine, yeah.
I like seeing Ohio State there at the top of the Big Ten. October 12th, man. I know you've already got it circled. That's gonna be crazy.
Oh, it's gonna be it's there's gonna be some really good games with this. I'm not a huge fan of all the crazy conference realignment and the 12-team playoff. There's certainly some nostalgia for the way it once was, but there's no arguing with these awesome matchups that we're going to get. And so Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, the return of these old rivalries with Texas A&M and Texas. There's going to be a lot of fun games this fall, and Ohio State's going to be featured at the center of many of them because they're going to be right there at the top of the rankings, I think, for most of the season.
There you have it, folks. Ohio State, one of the best rosters in college football, the top of the Big Ten power rankings, according to that man on the other side of that screen, Jesse Simonton. Jesse, it is always a pleasure having you over here on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. I know that our viewers get get some good information out of it. Thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Spencer.
We will see you guys back here on another edition of the Lettermen Row Off-Season Report. We'll see you guys next time.